the Corruption Watch organization is celebrating 10 years since its establishment back in 2012. This morning, the organization releasing a report focusing on the journey of over 36,200 whistleblowers in the fight against corruption in South Africa. Joining me for this discussion and to talk about the past decade and what it has revealed is Corruption Watch senior researcher Melusi Ncala. Mr. Ncala, thank you very much for your time. Two main talking points for me stemming from this report, and the first one has to do with the over 36,000 whistleblowers, their journey trying to expose corruption in the country. And it's a difficult time that these people have faced, and we speak now with at least one of them having met her fate in a very brutal manner. I'm talking about the former Gauteng health official, Babita Deokaran. Just detail for us very briefly the journey that whistleblowers have traveled in this country trying to expose corruption.
Good morning, Toli, and the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Thank you for the opportunity and in you allowing us to talk about our annual report from 2021. You are correct. As far as we are concerned, as Corruption Watch at least, the over 36,000 reports of corruption that we have received is testimony to the courage that ordinary people in South Africa have shown in us fighting corruption, and us fighting for corrupt-free South Africa. And they have been one of our main stakeholders in this entire process. I mean, when we started this journey at least 10 years ago, we were about, perhaps a lonely voice when people thought that we are being ridiculous raising corruption issues. But 10 years later, at least 36,000 South Africans agree with us, and they've raised very interesting and very sorrowful accounts about what's happening in government as well as the private sector.
As recently as last year, Mr. Ncala, you, or should I say the country, has witnessed what perhaps would be read as corruption stubbornly remaining in the country, particularly in the public sector. And again, I raise the name of Babita Deokaran. I think that will stay in the minds of ordinary South Africans for some time, to say, if you want to expose corruption and you are basically a whistleblower, you might not only lose your job, which means you're losing your livelihood, but you also now possibly could have your life ended, and ended in a way that is quite scary, frankly. What does that tell us about whether or not corruption is subsiding in the country or stubbornly remains?
It tells us several things, Toli. One being that, people are brave, and people have certain moral and ethical standards that they believe society should adhere to. And, it's a very unfortunate account that Babita Deokaran was assassinated, because essentially that's what it boils down to. There seems to be a political elite that does not think it's important to actually safeguard the country's resources. But that said, we are also deeply concerned about how whistleblowers are being treated. Hence, we are actually calling for a whistleblower agency that will look after whistleblowers. Most importantly, see to it that they are legally protected, financially secured, as well as have psychological support. This is part of the journey that we are traveling right now with whistleblowers, to say that government needs to act. It cannot be that, in the last 10 years or so, I think there were many cases, in fact, where whistleblowers were assassinated due to political interference, or at least political figures not being happy with the kind of information that's coming out to the public.
In a way, you are You're making me think here about how to frame my next question to you because of your constant reference to the political elite in this country whose temperature around corruption goes high only in words and not in action. Babita Deokaran, you speak about her and the political elite. Are you among those who are of the firm view that Babita Deokaran's assassination was as a result of a certain political figure or certain political figures in the country?
I mean, the information that is currently available, and I mean, the case is still ongoing. The criminal case, at least, is still ongoing. But the information that is apparent to all at this point in time is that she was blowing the whistle on some serious corrupt dealings that were happening within the Department of Health. And it's something that she's been doing for many, many years. Most recently, it had to do with PPEs, and it was implicating, we don't know who at this point in time, but officials, top officials within government.
Let's perhaps touch on the breakdown of corruption, Mr. Ncala, in the public sector and in the private sector. What do the numbers tell us?
Well, in 2021, Corruption Watch received over 3,200 reports of corruption. And 67% of this relate to the public sector, while the rest are about the private sector. A further breakdown tells us that 28% relate to national government, 24% local government. But further to that, 10% of the reports that were received last year are about corruption in the South African police. 5.8% relate to corruption in schools. I just want to give a quick breakdown in terms of the types of corruption, nationally what we've seen. The top form of corruption that we see is maladministration. This is followed by procurement corruption, as well as abuse of authority.
Maladministration. You see, that particular categorization of maladministration being characterized or seen as corruption, is that something that has always been there, maladministration, seeing it as corruption, or is it something that only came recently?
I mean, our working definition, so by that we mean that, we always need to reconsider what's happening within the environment, and of course looking at corruption in itself and our ethical obligations as people, is that corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for personal private gain. And so when you look at issues of maladministration, for example, and how deliberate some of these officials are in terms of the resources or the dispensing of resources, how they misuse it, it's very, very concerning to know that, there are municipalities, for example, there are schools that are collapsing due to incompetence, which is in the main deliberate in most instances.
Are there specific institutions where corruption remains stubbornly high?
That would be the South African Police Service, as I've mentioned. And of course, we have been doing ongoing work looking at schools, and that counts for 5.8 of the reports that we have received. What we've seen in police, for example, is that abuse of authority counts for 40% of the reports that we have received, whilst dereliction of duty, which simply means that police don't want to hold their own accountable, counts for 35%, and then bribery, extortion counts for 26% of the reports that we received in that particular focus area.
Yeah. The private sector, I'm trying to frame the question around there as to where is corruption most rife there? Which institutions, if you were to nail it down to institutions?
When it comes to private sector, it's vast. It's small to medium enterprises as well as big entities as well. And the type of corruption that we see, at least in the work that we've covered last year. Last year we actually released a report looking at the temporary employment relief scheme that government had, and we saw how companies in that particular instance, based on the whistleblower testimonies that we have received, were actually defrauding the state. So in this particular instance, those are the kind of cases that we are talking about.
That's Melusi Ncala. He is a Corruption Watch senior researcher there. Thank you very much for your reflections on how our country is doing on the score of corruption. They are celebrating 10 years of existence, and this morning putting out a report looking at various categories of corruption, but also importantly the journey that's been traveled thus far by people who stand opposed to corruption. These are commonly referred to as whistleblowers, the tough times that have come their way as a result of wanting to expose corruption.